London, 1857. The church bells of St. George's in Hanover Square chimed 11 o'clock as Violet Vance stood alone at the altar, her white satin gown pooling around her feet like the shattered remnants of her dreams. The pews, once filled with London's elite, now sat empty, save for a scattering of bewildered relatives and curious servants who hadn't yet been ushered away. "He isn't coming, Miss Vance." The vicar's voice was gentle but firm, a death knell to her hopes. Violet clutched her bouquet of lilies until the stems bent in her gloved hands. Xavier Jameson, handsome, charming, and heir to the Jameson shipping fortune, had abandoned her on their wedding day. The whispers had already begun around her, like the rustling of dry leaves before a storm. "Someone should fetch her father," an aunt murmured. "Poor dear." "The shame of it," another voice hissed. "She'll never recover." Violet refused to crumble before them. She had spent 23 years being the perfect daughter, the perfect lady, only to be discarded like yesterday's newspaper. Her chin lifted slightly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'll take her home." The voice, deep, rough-edged, and unmistakable, came from the church entrance. Zachary Jameson stood in silhouette, his broad shoulders blocking the light from the doorway. Unlike his golden-haired brother, Zachary was dark, severe, with eyes that seemed to harbor storms. He was the younger Jameson, the one who managed the less glamorous aspects of the family business while Xavier charmed investors in London's finest drawing rooms. "Mr. Jameson," the vicar acknowledged, relief evident in his tone. "Most appropriate." "The family should—" "Miss Vance," Zachary interrupted, striding down the aisle. He stopped before her, his face a careful mask. "My carriage is waiting." Only Violet noticed the muscle twitching in his jaw, the barely contained fury in his eyes. Not at her, never at her, but at the situation his brother had created. "Thank you, Mr. Jameson," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "But I believe my father has already departed with your mother." She was overcome. The unspoken truth hung between them. Her parents had fled the humiliation, leaving their daughter to face the aftermath alone. Zachary offered his arm, his gaze never leaving her face. "Allow me." With nowhere else to turn, Violet placed her trembling hand on his forearm. Together, they walked down the aisle, past the whispers and pitying glances, into the harsh London sunlight. Outside, the street was lined with onlookers and gossipmongers eager to witness her disgrace. Several newspaper men scribbled furiously in their notepads. By tomorrow, her abandonment would be headline news in every society paper from London to Bath. Zachary guided her to a black carriage, his body shielding her from prying eyes. Once inside, Violet finally allowed her composure to crack. A single tear tracked down her cheek. "Where is he?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the clatter of hooves as the carriage pulled away. Zachary's expression darkened. "Aboard the Artemis, bound for Boston." He fled the country. The enormity of Xavier's betrayal crashed over her. Without a word. "He left this." Zachary withdrew a folded letter from his coat pocket, hesitating before extending it to her. "I haven't read it." Violet took the letter with numb fingers, breaking the seal that bore the Jameson crest. Xavier's elegant script swam before her eyes. Asterisk, "My dearest Violet, asterisk, asterisk, by the time you read this, I will be at sea. I cannot go through with our marriage. The chains of matrimony and responsibility have always sat too heavily upon me. Please know that I bear you no ill will. Indeed, I count myself fortunate to have escaped entrapment by one so lovely. Asterisk, asterisk, do convey my regrets to our families. Asterisk, asterisk, fondly, asterisk. Asterisk, Xavier, asterisk, entrapment, she whispered, the paper crumpling in her fist. As though I had set a snare for him, when it was his father who arranged everything. Zachary's knuckles whitened as he gripped his walking stick. My brother has always excelled at avoiding consequences. The carriage rolled through London's fashionable districts, past the very homes where she had once been welcomed as Xavier Jameson's fiancé. Now those doors would be closed to her. A woman jilted at the altar was an object of ridicule, a cautionary tale mothers would whisper to their daughters. Where are we going? She asked, suddenly realizing they had passed the turning to her parents' home in Belgravia. To Jameson House, Zachary replied. My father wishes to speak with you. Fear coiled in her stomach. Lord Jameson was not known for his gentle nature. The marriage had been advantageous for both families, her father's ancestral name and connections balanced by the Jamesons' more recent but substantial fortune. I cannot face him, she said. Not today. Not like this. Zachary studied her for a long moment. Very well. He rapped on the roof, instructing the driver to take them to Hyde Park instead. They sat in silence as the carriage rumbled through London streets. Violet was acutely aware of Zachary's presence across from her, the man who had always stood in his brother's shadow, who watched everything with those penetrating eyes that missed nothing. You deserved better than him, Zachary said suddenly, his voice low. You always did. Violet looked up, startled by both his words and the intensity in his gaze. In the years of her engagement to Xavier, Zachary had always maintained a polite distance, speaking to her only when necessary, avoiding the social gatherings she attended with his brother. You hardly know me, Mr. Jameson. I know enough. His eyes held hers. I know you read Byron when everyone else is discussing the latest fashion plates. I know you speak 3 languages and can discuss politics with more insight than most members of Parliament. I know my brother never deserved you. Heat bloomed in her cheeks. How could you possibly, I observe, Miss Vance? While my brother was busy charming the room, I was watching you. The carriage stopped at the park entrance. Zachary descended first, offering his hand to help her down. She took it, feeling the rough calluses on his palm, evidence of a man who worked alongside the laborers in his family's shipyards rather than merely directing them from afar. They walked in silence through the park, an odd pair, she still in her wedding gown, he in formal attire more suited to a church than an afternoon stroll. Passers-by stared openly, and Violet could almost hear tomorrow's gossip, the poor Vance girl, abandoned by one Jameson brother only to be seen walking with the other. People are staring, she murmured. Let them, Zachary replied, his stride never faltering. You've done nothing to be ashamed of. Haven't I? Bitterness crept into her voice. I clearly wasn't enough to make your brother stay. Zachary stopped abruptly, turning to face her. My brother, he said, each word precise and cutting, is a selfish, spoiled child who has never valued anything of true worth in his life. His leaving is a reflection of his character, not yours. The fierce defense surprised her. In all their limited interactions, Zachary had never spoken against his brother, had never revealed any resentment toward the heir who enjoyed every privilege while the younger son worked in his shadow. Why are you being kind to me? She asked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Because someone should be. They resumed walking, following the path around the Serpentine. The afternoon light filtered through the trees, dappling the ground with golden patches that seemed to mock the darkness of the day. What will you do now? Zachary asked after a long silence. The question struck her like a physical blow. What would she do? Her reputation was in tatters, her family humiliated, her future uncertain. She had been raised for one purpose, to make an advantageous marriage, and now that path was closed to her. I don't know, she admitted. Return to my parents' home, I suppose. Hide away until the scandal dies down. And then? And then? She faltered. Perhaps a quiet life in the country. Or I could become a governess. The thought of teaching other women's children while watching them fulfill the future she had lost was almost unbearable. Zachary's expression hardened. You deserve more than exile. What I deserve and what society will allow are rarely the same thing, Mr. Jameson. They had completed a circuit of the lake and now stood at a crossroads in the path. Violet knew she should return home, face her parents' disappointment, begin the long process of adjusting to her new, diminished circumstances. Yet she lingered, reluctant to leave Zachary's steadying presence. I should go home, she said finally. Yes. But he made no move to guide her back to the carriage. Instead, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small parcel wrapped in tissue paper. I had intended to give you this after the ceremony. Confused, Violet accepted the package. Inside was a delicate silver bookmark, engraved with a passage from Byron, * she walks in beauty, like the night. * you remembered, she whispered, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. As I said, I observe. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Violet glimpsed something behind his reserved demeanor, something raw and unguarded. I should return you to your parents now. The ride to her family's home was silent, each lost in thought. When they arrived, Zachary helped her down from the carriage, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, she said, for your kindness today. He nodded once, his expression inscrutable. Good day, Miss Vance. As the carriage pulled away, Violet clutched the silver bookmark in her palm, the metal warm against her skin. It occurred to her that in all the years of her engagement, Xavier had never given her anything so thoughtfully chosen. The next morning brought exactly what Violet had feared. The scandal sheets were merciless, * abandoned at the altar, Jameson heir flees matrimony. **, jilted. Miss V.E.V. left to face society's scorn. **, exclusive, Xavier Jameson escapes entrapments by fleeing to America. **, her mother took to her bed with a case of nerves that required frequent doses of laudanum. Her father retreated to his club, unable to face the whispers and sidelong glances of society. Violet was left alone with the servants, who tried to hide the newspapers from her but couldn't conceal the pitying glances they cast in her direction. On the third day after the non-wedding, a letter arrived bearing the Jameson seal. Violet's heart stuttered. Had Xavier returned? Apologized? But the handwriting on the envelope wasn't Xavier's flowing script, it was a firmer, more decisive hand. She opened it with trembling fingers. Miss Vance, I write to inform you that my father intends to call upon yours this afternoon to discuss the matter of your broken engagement. Please be assured that the Jameson family acknowledges the grave injustice done to you and seeks to make appropriate amends. With respect *. Zachary Jameson *. The formality of the note couldn't disguise its underlying message. The Jamesons were coming to offer compensation for her ruined reputation. The thought made her stomach churn. What price would they put on her future? What sum would they deem sufficient to offset the public humiliation? When Lord Jameson arrived that afternoon, he was accompanied not by his wife, as protocol might dictate, but by Zachary. They were shown into the drawing room where Violet sat with her father, who had reluctantly returned from his club for the meeting. Lord Vance. Miss Vance. Lord Jameson bowed stiffly. He was a barrel-chested man with silver at his temples and the weathered complexion of someone who had spent decades on ships before settling into the role of shipping magnate. I come to express my deepest regrets for my son's unconscionable behavior. Regrets won't restore my daughter's reputation, Jameson, her father replied coldly. No, but perhaps this will help. Lord Jameson withdrew a document from his coat. A settlement in your daughter's name. £50,000, to be held in trust for her exclusive use. Violet's father's eyebrows rose. It was a substantial sum, more than many women would see in a lifetime. Money won't erase what happened, Violet said quietly. No, it won't, Lord Jameson agreed, his expression grave. But it will ensure your independence, Miss Vance. You need never marry for financial security. The implication was clear, she would likely never have another opportunity to marry well, not after such a public rejection. I have another proposal, Zachary said, speaking for the first time since their arrival. All eyes turned to him, surprised by his interruption. Zachary, his father warned, we've discussed this. No, you dismissed it without discussion. Zachary turned to Violet, his gaze direct. Miss Vance, would you do me the honor of taking a turn in the garden? There is a matter I wish to discuss privately. Her father began to protest, but Violet was already rising from her seat. Of course, Mr. Jameson. In the garden, spring flowers were beginning to bloom, their fragrance filling the air with promise that seemed at odds with the circumstances. Zachary led her to a stone bench partially concealed by a flowering hedge, away from the windows where their fathers undoubtedly watched. Miss Vance, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words, so unlike his usual decisive manner. Violet. I have a proposal that may shock you, but I ask that you hear me fully before responding. Her heart quickened at his use of her given name. Go on. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Violet stared at him, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon. Marry me, he repeated, more firmly this time. Not today, not tomorrow, but in 6 months' time, when the worst of the scandal has faded. Mr. Jameson, if this is some misplaced sense of family obligation, it is not. His voice was sharp, almost angry. Do you think me so noble that I would sacrifice my future for my brother's mistakes? Or so lacking in feeling that I would marry without affection? Then why, she whispered. Zachary's expression softened slightly. Because I have watched you for 3 years, Violet. I have seen your intelligence, your kindness, your strength. I have observed you managing my brother's thoughtlessness with grace. I have witnessed your patience with my father's gruffness and my mother's snobbery. He took her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man with such calloused palms. I had resigned myself to watching you marry my brother, to seeing you at family gatherings for decades to come, always at his side, never at mine. When he fled, he shook his head. I should not be grateful for your pain, but I cannot help seeing an opportunity one never thought to have. Violet's mind reeled. You cannot mean that I admire you greatly, he said, choosing his words carefully. I believe we could build a life of mutual respect and companionship. In time, perhaps more. It was not a declaration of passionate love, but there was something in his steady gaze that moved her more deeply than Xavier's flowery compliments ever had. Your family would never accept such an arrangement, she said. Society would be scandalized, the jilted bride marrying the brother of the man who abandoned her. Society will gossip regardless of what you do, Zachary countered. At least this way, you retain your position. The Jameson name will still be yours, but attached to a man who would never dishonor his vows. He was offering her salvation from social ruin, a future that, while different from what she had planned, would not be without advantages. Zachary might lack his brother's charm, but he possessed qualities Xavier had never demonstrated: reliability, honesty, determination. I need time to consider, she said finally. Of course. He released her hand. I would not expect an immediate answer to such a proposal. They returned to the drawing room, where their fathers awaited with poorly concealed impatience. Well? Lord Jameson demanded. Miss Vance will consider my proposal, Zachary replied evenly. I have suggested that in 6 months' time, we might announce an engagement, should she find the arrangement agreeable. Lord Vance's face flushed with anger. This is highly irregular. First one brother abandons her, and now the other offers a delayed proposal. The Jameson family seems determined to extend my daughter's humiliation. On the contrary, Zachary said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I am offering Miss Vance time to recover from my brother's betrayal and to determine whether she could be content as my wife. I have no interest in a bride who accepts me merely to escape scandal. The weeks that followed were the most difficult of Violet's life. She withdrew from society, unable to face the whispers and stares. Her mother emerged from her laudanum haze only to lament the ruin of their family's standing. Her father buried himself in his business affairs, barely acknowledging her presence. Letters arrived daily from former friends, their expressions of sympathy thinly veiling their curiosity and, in some cases, satisfaction at her downfall. She had been envied as Xavier Jameson's fiancé, now she was pitied as his cast-off. Only one correspondent offered genuine comfort. Zachary wrote to her twice weekly, never pressing for an answer to his proposal, but sharing observations about his day, recommending books he thought she might enjoy, occasionally including pressed flowers or interesting news clippings. I encountered Lady Worcester at a business luncheon today. She inquired after you with what appeared to be genuine concern. I told her you were well and spending time with your family. She said to tell you that her drawing room welcomes you whenever you wish to return to society. The shipping company has acquired a new vessel, a sleek clipper that promises to reduce the Atlantic crossing by nearly a week. I find myself wondering if you might like to see it launched. There is something magnificent about watching such a creation meet the water for the first time. I have enclosed a copy of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's new collection. Her sonnets remind me of conversations we might have in a world less constrained by propriety and circumstance. Slowly, Violet began to look forward to these letters, to the glimpse they offered into Zachary's mind. He was thoughtful, observant, and possessed of a dry wit that never appeared in his public demeanor. She found herself responding with increasing openness, sharing her thoughts in a way she had never done with Xavier. Lady Worcester's kindness surprises me, though perhaps it shouldn't. She was always more substance than show, unlike many in our circle. I may take her up on her invitation, though the thought of facing society still fills me with dread. I would very much like to see the clippers launch. I have never witnessed such an event, though I've read about them. Is it true that they still break a bottle of champagne across the bow? It seems a terrible waste of good champagne, though I suppose traditions rarely bow to practicality. Thank you for the Browning. Her words speak to something in my soul I had nearly forgotten existed. I find myself wondering what else I have forgotten, or perhaps never known, about myself, now that I am no longer defined by my connection to your brother. In her 4th month of seclusion, Violet received an unexpected visitor. Lady Jameson, Zachary and Xavier's mother, was announced one afternoon while Violet sat alone in the drawing room, reading one of Zachary's recommended books. Lady Jameson, Violet said, rising to curtsy. This is unexpected. The older woman's face was a study in conflicting emotions, pride, discomfort, and something that might have been guilt. Miss Vance. You look well. An awkward silence fell between them. Lady Jameson had never shown Violet particular warmth, even during her engagement to Xavier. She had been cordial but distant, as though reserving judgment on this young woman who would join her family. My son tells me he has proposed marriage, Lady Jameson said finally. Yes. Violet saw no reason to dissemble. Though I have not yet given him an answer. Lady Jameson's eyebrows arched slightly. Most young women would leap at the chance to secure the Jameson name after such a setback. Violet lifted her chin. I am not most young women, Lady Jameson. And I have already learned the cost of marrying a Jameson man without fully understanding his character. Rather than taking offense, Lady Jameson's lips curved into a small, appreciative smile. Indeed. Perhaps that is why my younger son is so determined to have you. She moved to the window, looking out at the garden where Violet and Zachary had walked months earlier. Zachary has always been the more serious of my sons. Where Xavier charmed, Zachary observed. Where Xavier spent, Zachary built. She turned back to Violet. I feared, when he first spoke of this proposal, that he was acting from some misplaced sense of family honor. As did I, Violet admitted. I no longer believe that to be the case. Lady Jameson's gaze was penetrating. My son has never shown particular interest in any young woman of our acquaintance. He has been entirely focused on the business, on securing the family's future while his brother. She sighed. While Xavier enjoyed the fruits of that labor. She moved closer to Violet, her voice softening. But he speaks of you differently. Watches for your letters. I believe he genuinely admires you, Miss Vance. And you? Violet asked boldly. Would you welcome me as a daughter-in-law, knowing the circumstances? Lady Jameson considered the question. I would welcome a woman of strength and intelligence who values my son for himself, not for his name or fortune. Whether that woman is you? She inclined her head slightly. I believe that remains to be seen. The visit, brief though it was, left Violet thoughtful. Lady Jameson had not offered effusive encouragement, but neither had she opposed the match. She had, in her reserved way, given Violet something to consider. Zachary's proposal might indeed stem from genuine feeling rather than obligation. That evening, Violet wrote to Zachary, *Your mother called today. It was an enlightening conversation. She seems to believe your proposal stems from genuine regard rather than family duty. I find myself hoping she is correct. I have had much time to reflect these past months. My heart, which I once thought broken beyond repair, has begun to heal. In that healing, I have discovered something unexpected. The woman I was with Xavier is not the woman I wish to be. I would like to see the Clipper launch, if the invitation still stands. Perhaps afterward, we might discuss our future more directly. His reply came the very next morning, delivered by a breathless messenger boy. The launching is set for tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I will call for you at 10. Wear practical shoes and bring a warm shawl. The river air can be biting, even in summer. As for our future, I am, as always, at your disposal. But I will add this: my mother is a perceptive woman. Her assessment of my motivations is not without merit. Until tomorrow. Zachary. The shipyard was unlike anywhere Violet had ever been. The air smelled of tar and river water, sawdust and sweat. Workers called to each other in rough voices, hauling ropes and carrying tools. At the center of it all stood the Clipper, magnificent in its unfinished state, balanced on massive wooden beams that led down to the Thames. Zachary was transformed in this environment. Gone was the reserved, formal man who stood in his brother's shadow at society functions. Here, he moved with authority and ease, greeted by name by workmen who clearly respected him. He explained the shipbuilding process to Violet without condescension, answering her questions with evident pleasure at her interest. She's called the Violet Dawn, he told her as they stood gazing up at the vessel. Named just last week. The significance of the name was not lost on her. A rather pointed choice, Mr. Jameson. His mouth quirked in a rare smile. I thought it appropriate. Dawn follows the darkest hour, after all. The launching itself was magnificent. Violet stood on a viewing platform with Zachary and his father, watching as the last restraints were removed and the great ship began its slide into the water, gathering momentum until it hit the Thames with a tremendous splash that sent waves rippling to both shores. The assembled crowd cheered, workers threw their caps in the air, and Zachary, caught in the moment, took Violet's hand and squeezed it tightly. The gesture was small, almost unconscious, but it sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the summer sun. After the ceremony, as workers dispersed to celebrate the successful launch with a barrel of ale provided by Lord Jameson, Zachary led Violet to a quiet corner of the shipyard. They sat on a wooden bench overlooking the river, watching as the Violet Dawn was maneuvered to its mooring by small tugboats. You said we might discuss our future, Zachary began, his voice carefully neutral. Have you reached a decision regarding my proposal? Violet studied him, this serious, thoughtful man who had shown her more consideration in a few months of correspondence than Xavier had in 3 years of courtship. I have questions first, she said. If we were to marry, what sort of life would you envision for us? Would I be merely an ornament in your home, or a true partner? Zachary considered her question with the same gravity he seemed to apply to all matters. I would expect a partnership, he said finally. My work often takes me to the shipyards and occasionally abroad. I would want a wife who could manage our household in my absence, who could engage with our business associates intelligently, who would raise our children to value substance over appearance. And if I wished to pursue interests of my own? Education, perhaps, or charitable work. I would encourage it. His expression softened slightly. I have no desire for a wife who withers from boredom or lack of purpose. Violet nodded slowly. And what of affection, Zachary? Could you be content in a marriage begun in such unusual circumstances? It was the first time she had used his given name, and she saw the impact of it in his eyes, a flash of something warm and surprised. I believe, he said carefully, that deep respect is the foundation of lasting affection. I respect you greatly, Violet. The rest, I think, would follow naturally. It wasn't a passionate declaration of love, but it was honest, and somehow more reassuring than Xavier's flowery protestations had ever been. Then yes, she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering of her heart. In 2 months' time, when the 6 months you suggested have passed, I will marry you. His expression remained serious, but his eyes warmed with something that might have been joy. "You're certain? I would not hold you to this if you have any doubts." "I have lived my entire life doing what was expected of me," Violet replied. "This is the first decision I am making entirely for myself, based on what I have observed and learned. I believe we could build something worthwhile together, Zachary." He took her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that was both formal and startlingly intimate. "Then I am the most fortunate of men." Their wedding, held exactly 6 months after the day Xavier had abandoned her at the altar, was a quiet affair. Only family and close friends were invited to the ceremony at St. Mary's Church, deliberately chosen to avoid painful comparisons to the grand wedding that never took place at St. George's. Violet wore a gown of pale blue silk rather than white satin, her hair simply styled and adorned with fresh flowers rather than the elaborate diamond tiara Xavier had insisted upon. Zachary waited at the altar, his expression solemn but his eyes never leaving hers as she walked toward him on her father's arm. Society whispered, "Of course." They called it a marriage of convenience, a family reparation, a settlement for damaged goods. But as Violet stood before the vicar, speaking her vows to a man who had proven his character through actions rather than words, she found she no longer cared what society thought. Their wedding night approached with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Zachary had been a perfect gentleman throughout their engagement, never presuming upon their future relationship, maintaining a respectful distance even as their conversations grew more personal and open. When Violet entered their bedroom at Jameson House, a different wing from where she would have lived with Xavier, she found Zachary standing by the window, gazing out at the London night. "Are you disappointed?" he asked without turning, his voice low. "That it is me waiting for you, rather than him?" The vulnerability in the question touched her deeply. She crossed the room to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "No," she said simply. "I am not disappointed." He turned then, studying her face as though searching for confirmation of her words. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him, for the tension eased from his shoulders. "I want you to know," he said, taking her hands in his, "that I will never expect more than you wish to give." "If you need time," Violet silenced him by rising on her tiptoes and pressing her lips gently to his. It was a brief kiss, almost chaste, but it conveyed what words could not, her trust, her willingness, her growing affection for this man who had rescued her from disgrace and offered her a future she had never imagined. "I don't need time," she whispered against his lips. "I need you." His restraint broke then, and he gathered her into his arms, his kiss deeper now, filled with a passion he had kept carefully banked during their courtship. Violet responded in kind, discovering a desire she had never experienced with Xavier, whose kisses had always left her slightly cold. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the covers, Zachary traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "I never thought to have this," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "When Xavier announced your engagement, I resigned myself to watching you from afar for the rest of my life." Violet raised herself on one elbow, looking down at his face, so much more expressive now than in the early days of their acquaintance. "How long?" she asked. "How long have you felt this way?" A rueful smile touched his lips. "Since the Worcester's Christmas ball, 3 years ago. You were discussing Byron with old Professor Lambert while everyone else was dancing. You quoted as she walks in beauty from memory, and your eyes lit up when he recognized the more obscure verses. You remember that?" she asked, astonished. "I didn't even know you were there." "I was always there, Violet. Always watching." He reached up to touch her cheek. "I envied my brother his right to stand beside you, to claim your attention, to call you his. But I never envied his inability to see your true worth." "And now," she whispered. His eyes, dark and intense, held hers. "Now I thank whatever twist of fate brought you to me instead of him. I may not have been your first choice, Violet, but I swear to you, I will spend my life ensuring you never regret choosing me second." Violet leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. "Not second," she corrected gently. "Just later than I should have." 6 months into their marriage, a letter arrived from Boston bearing Xavier's distinctive handwriting. Zachary handed it to her without comment, his face carefully neutral as she broke the seal. Dear Violet, news travels slowly across the Atlantic, but word has reached me of your marriage to my brother. I must confess to some surprise, Zachary has always been so serious, so devoted to duty rather than pleasure. I would not have thought him your sort at all. I find myself curious about this unexpected development. Was it arranged to save the family from scandal? A consolation prize for your damaged prospects? Or has my stoic brother revealed hidden depths I never glimpsed? Whatever the case, I wish you well. Perhaps when the gossip has died down, I shall return to London and we can all laugh about the curious twist our lives have taken. Fondly. Xavier. Violet read the letter twice, noting the casual selfishness that characterized every line, the complete absence of genuine remorse for the pain he had caused. Once, such a letter would have devastated her. Now, it merely confirmed what she had come to understand: Xavier Jameson had never truly seen her at all. She handed the letter back to Zachary, who had watched her reaction closely. "Will you reply?" he asked. Violet moved to the desk in their shared study, took out a sheet of paper, and penned a brief response: Xavier, thank you for your letter. I am indeed happily married to Zachary. What you perceive as seriousness, I recognize as depth of character. What you dismiss as duty, I value as integrity. You need not concern yourself with the circumstances of our union. Know only that I have found with your brother what I never had with you, a partnership of equals, bound by mutual respect and genuine affection. I wish you well in America and suggest you remain there a while longer. London society has a long memory for scandal, and your brother and I are quite content without your presence to complicate our happiness. Sincerely. Violet Jameson. She sealed the letter and handed it to Zachary, who had watched her write with undisguised curiosity. "May I?" he asked, indicating the seal. At her nod, he broke it open and read her words. When he looked up, his eyes held a warmth that still had the power to make her heart beat faster. "Partnership of equals," he quoted, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Genuine affection." Violet rose from the desk and moved to stand before him. "Would you have preferred I tell him the truth?" she asked, her voice softening. "That being abandoned at the altar was the most fortunate event of my life? That it led me to the man I should have chosen from the beginning? That I have found not just respect and affection with his brother, but love?" Zachary's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had spoken that word aloud, though it had been growing between them through months of shared conversations, common purposes, and nights spent in each other's arms. "Love," he repeated, his voice barely audible. Violet reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Yes, Zachary. Love. I love you, not as the consolation prize Xavier imagines you to be, but as the man you are. The man who saw me when I was invisible to everyone else, who valued me for my mind as well as my face, who offered me not just his name but his heart." He gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she were something infinitely precious. "I have loved you from afar for so long," he murmured against her hair. "To hear you say those words." "Get used to hearing them," she said, smiling against his chest. "I intend to say them quite frequently for the next 50 years or so." Zachary laughed, the sound rich and free in a way it had never been before their marriage. "Only 50? You underestimate my determination, my love. I plan to keep you for much longer than that." As his lips found hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, Violet silently thanked the twist of fate that had left her standing alone at the altar 6 months ago. In being abandoned by one brother, she had found her way to the other, and in doing so, had discovered not just a husband, but a partner, a friend, and a love that would last a lifetime.